My name is Matthews. I'm 34, and I've been a nurse for over a decade now. I live in Chicago in a small but peaceful apartment, just a few blocks from the hospital where I work the night shift. Most days I come home when the streets are still quiet, the city barely waking. I shower, eat something warm, and curl into bed just as the world outside starts moving. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. And it's mine. My life, as simple as it is, has never quite satisfied my family. In their eyes, I somehow fell short of the mark. I didn't marry young. I didn't marry at all. I don't have children. My mother says I focus too much on work. My aunts say I should freeze my eggs before it's too late. And my younger sister Claire, well, she never had to hear any of that. She played the game the right way. Claire is 2 years younger than me, married for almost 4 years, and now she's expecting her first child. The Matthews family group chat has been buzzing nonstop for weeks. Photos of tiny shoes, a Pinterest board of nursery themes, and countdowns to her baby shower. No one asks about my night shifts or the trauma cases I handle. They just want to know if I'll be free on Sunday at 11 o'clock. The invitation arrived in the mail a week ago. Pale pink envelope, gold trim, baby footprints on the front. Inside was the formal invite to Claire's baby shower, complete with RSVP details, and the request to bring a book instead of a card. But it was the sticky note attached that really caught me. My mom's handwriting. Still single, sweetheart. Maybe you'll meet someone at the party. We're rooting for you. That's what it said. Just that. I laughed. Not the kind of laugh that makes you feel good, though. More like the kind that scratches something raw inside. I set the note down on the table and stared at it like it might rewrite itself if I waited long enough. But it didn't. It just sat there, smug and pastel. That night I didn't sleep much. My body was exhausted from a 12-hour shift, but my mind wouldn't stop rewinding conversations from years ago. The Thanksgivings where everyone asked about Claire's boyfriend, never mine. The birthdays where I brought store-bought cupcakes while Claire presented hand-decorated pies and centerpieces. And now the baby. The golden baby. It wasn't jealousy. Not really. It was the silence. The way no one ever asked what I wanted. My mom called the next morning. She always calls on Saturdays. She talks about Claire a lot, then ends the call by telling me to rest more. That morning, her voice was bright, cheerful. She asked if I got the invitation. I said yes. She waited for me to say more, but I didn't. There was a beat of silence before she sighed and told me I should wear something cheerful. Maybe the yellow dress I wore 2 Easters ago. She said it brought out the hope in my face. Hope. That was the word she used. I told her I'd think about it. She said she already told Claire I was coming. Then she hung up to go to a floral shop with Aunt Judith. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that, my coffee going cold. I looked around at my quiet apartment, the stacks of medical textbooks on the shelf, the photo of my co-workers at the hospital Christmas party, the orchid I've managed to keep alive for 3 years. My life didn't look like theirs, but it was real. It was mine. I'd chosen it on purpose. Still, that sticky note felt like a dare, like a spotlight I didn't ask for, and maybe a chance to stand in it. For the first time, I thought, what if I didn't just survive the day? What if I showed up and owned it? So I circled the date. I picked out a navy blue dress. Not cheerful, not hopeful, just honest. And when Sunday came, I walked into that baby shower knowing exactly who I was. The sky was a clear, soft blue that Sunday morning, with just enough breeze to make the trees dance. I pulled into Claire's driveway at 10:45. Her neighborhood was all fresh paint and curated hedges. The kind of place where mailboxes matched and everyone smiled with too many teeth. Balloons were tied to the railing, soft pinks and creams. A welcome sign rested against the front door with baby blocks spelling Claire's name. Inside, the air was scented with vanilla and something floral. The living room had been transformed into a Pinterest board. Streamers, calligraphy banners, a gift table drowning in ribbons. Guests stood in small clusters with champagne flutes and faux admiration. I stepped in holding the wrapped picture book I'd brought, unsure where to stand. A woman I barely knew hugged me. "You look rested," she said. I smiled and said thank you, though I'd just come off a shift the night before. My mom found me near the mimosa bar. She gave me a once-over, her eyes pausing at my navy dress. "It's a bit dark, don't you think?" she whispered, then kissed my cheek. She motioned toward the gift table and told me to put mine somewhere it wouldn't get crushed. Claire floated into the room 10 minutes later like she was carried by applause. She wore a blush maternity gown and a flower crown. People clapped. A woman near me murmured that pregnancy suited her. Claire's eyes locked with mine for half a second. Then she looked away like she'd just spotted a crumb on the floor. The guests split between family and college friends. The friends were loud, bubbly, all talk of registries and labor plans. The family asked about Claire's nursery color palette and if she planned on going back to work. No one asked me anything until Aunt Beth slid beside me and asked if I was still in the ER. I nodded. She smiled. "Still so busy." "Maybe someday you'll slow down and make time for someone," she added, sipping from her flute. I wandered toward the snack table. There were 3 cheese boards, 2 quiches, and a tray of chocolate-dipped strawberries arranged like rattles. A cousin I hadn't seen in years asked if I ever thought about freezing my eggs. She said it like she was asking about the weather. At 11:30, Claire stood near the fireplace to make a toast. She thanked everyone for coming. She beamed at her husband Andrew, then gave Mom a shout-out for helping with the setup. When she mentioned that she was excited to raise a daughter in such a supportive family, she glanced at me again. There was something unreadable in that glance. Maybe a challenge. Maybe nothing at all. The guests clapped. Someone yelled she was glowing. Another asked when her next baby would be. Claire laughed and said, "Let's get through the first one first." Then someone else, I think it was a neighbor, asked if I was Claire's sister. I said yes. Her eyes widened. "Oh, and are you married too?" I said no. She tilted her head like I'd just told her I'd lost a pet. "Well," she said, "not everyone's path is the same. Some people bloom later." I smiled the way you smile when someone touches a bruise too hard. I spent most of the next hour pretending to check my phone. Every time I looked up, someone else was offering Claire a gift or telling her how lucky her baby would be. I sipped my lukewarm coffee and nodded when spoken to. No one asked about my patience. No one asked how I was sleeping or what it felt like to hold someone's hand while they took their last breath. But I didn't expect them to. By the time the cupcakes came out, I was sitting on the edge of the couch, flipping through a children's book someone else had gifted. It was called Dream Big, Little One. I turned the pages slowly, my thumb grazing the illustrations. My mom sat beside me and leaned in. "You're doing okay, right?" she asked. I looked at her. I wanted to say something sharp, but instead I said I was fine. She patted my knee and said she just wanted me to be happy. Then she stood up and called over another guest to look at Claire's maternity photos printed on canvas. I stayed seated. I kept flipping the pages, and somewhere deep in my chest, a little door closed. By noon, everyone had moved to the dining room. The cake was placed in the center of a long white table lined with gifts and floral arrangements. It was 2 tiers pink frosting piped into tiny roses with "It's a Girl" written in gold across the top. Claire stood behind it, hands folded just beneath her belly as someone handed her a knife for the first slice. Before cutting, she held up a hand, smiling at the room. She wanted to say a few words, she said. Just something small. Everyone leaned in. Someone raised a phone to record. Claire thanked her friends for showing up, her coworkers for pitching in, and of course her family for being the most supportive anyone could ask for. Then her eyes flicked toward me. The smile didn't change, but the warmth in her voice did. She said how lucky she was to have grown up in a house where she could see 2 paths, one that led to diapers and lullabies, and another that led to scrubs and takeout dinners. The room paused. She laughed. Not that there's anything wrong with that, she added, raising her eyebrows in my direction. Some people are called to different things. A ripple of laughter moved through the room. It wasn't loud, but it landed. My mother chuckled, covering her mouth. One of the cousins elbowed another. Someone whispered something behind their glass. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Claire moved on. She talked about her husband's patience, how he painted the nursery without even complaining about the glitter. Everyone laughed again, this time kindly. My mom clapped her hands and said, "That's real love." I watched her face, looking for anything, a glance of discomfort, a flicker of regret. There was none. She looked proud. I felt like I was sitting inside a snow globe trapped behind glass while everyone else danced in the swirling confetti. My cheeks burned. My throat tightened. But I didn't cry. Not there. Not yet. I reached for my coffee, now cold, and held the cup like it could anchor me. They passed out slices of cake. Claire walked by and handed me one. Chocolate. My favorite. She said nothing, just a tight smile. I took it, nodded. My hands trembled slightly, but I kept them still on my lap. In that moment, the air felt too heavy, the ceiling too low, the laughter too sharp. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was betrayal. A quiet kind that doesn't leave bruises but settles deep into the ribs. I looked around the table. Not one person had looked at me with concern. Not one leaned over to soften the blow. They laughed. They moved on, and I stayed seated. Alone, even in the middle of the room. I stood near the hallway, debating whether to slip out quietly or make polite goodbyes. My hand clutched my purse a little too tightly, my fingers cold despite the heat of the room. I told myself it wasn't a big deal, that I'd survived worse shifts in the trauma bay, that no one's words could cut deeper than what I'd seen at 3 o'clock in the morning on a gurney soaked with blood. But somehow this stung more. The front door opened behind me. I didn't turn at first. There was a hush, a slight pause in the rhythm of small talk and cutlery. Then I heard footsteps and a soft voice announcing sorry for being late. I glanced back. A man in a gray blazer stepped in, holding the hand of a little girl with chestnut curls. His tie was slightly askew and his eyes scanned the room with quiet ease. He looked out of place, not flustered but unfamiliar, like he'd walked into the wrong memory. The little girl released his hand almost immediately and wandered forward, tugging gently on the hem of her dress. People began whispering. Someone asked Claire who that was. Claire didn't seem to know either. The man spotted her and walked over, saying something in a low voice that I couldn't hear from where I stood. Claire nodded, then motioned toward the seating area and turned away. She didn't smile this time. The girl, meanwhile, had made her way to the end of the gift table where I stood. She looked up at me without hesitation. I smiled, not expecting her to stay. But she didn't leave. She looked at my plate, then at the unopened book I had wrapped earlier. "Do you like stories?" she asked. I knelt slightly so we were at eye level. I said yes, I did. She grinned. "Me too. Daddy says good stories make us braver." She held up a small plush fox. "This is Oliver. He always gets scared, but he still tries." I nodded, feeling something gentle unwind in my chest. She had the kind of honesty kids carry before the world teaches them to hide it. Her father walked over, noticing us. He introduced himself as Dr. Adam Green. Apologized again for being late. Said he and Claire worked together at the hospital, and that Emma, his daughter, had insisted on bringing a book. I told him she had great taste in conversation. He smiled, warm but tired, a kind of tired I recognized. We spoke only for a minute, but it felt longer. The room, once sharp and loud, seemed to quiet around us. Emma tugged on my sleeve and asked if I could read her story sometime. I said maybe. She beamed, then ran off to chase a balloon across the floor. Adam watched her, then looked back at me. For a second, neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. Something had shifted, a softness, a thread. And just like that, I no longer felt like leaving. The baby shower had begun to thin out. Plates were half-empty glasses near dry. Conversation floated in the background, soft and scattered. I sat near the fireplace, away from the noise, absently twisting a napkin in my hands. That familiar tightness in my chest had finally begun to ease like pressure leaving a balloon. Adam approached with a quiet sort of energy. He had a plate of fruit and 2 forks. Said Emma insisted he find someone to share the strawberries with. I smiled. He sat down beside me, leaving just enough space to feel respectful, not distant. For a moment we didn't talk. The silence wasn't awkward. It just settled. He told me he worked in pediatric oncology, that Claire was part of the maternity wing, and they had overlapped during a few rotation meetings. He said she mentioned the baby shower in passing and Emma had overheard. She loves babies, he said. And cupcakes. I nodded. Said I worked nights at St. Luke's, mostly trauma. He raised an eyebrow. That explains the eyes. I laughed, caught off guard by the gentleness in his tone. He wasn't teasing, just observing. We talked like people who had both stayed up too many nights, seen too much life unravel in hospital rooms, learned how to speak without saying everything out loud. He asked how long I'd been a nurse. I said 12 years. He asked if I liked it. I said I didn't know anymore. Then I added that I liked being useful. That seemed to land. He shifted in his seat, rubbed the back of his neck. Said he lost his wife 4 years ago. Cancer. Fast, cruel. Emma had only been 2. There was a moment where his voice caught just a fraction. I didn't say I was sorry. I just looked at him. That was enough. He smiled again. Said raising a child alone wasn't what he planned, but she made it easier. Every morning, he said, she greets the sun like it's brand new. That kind of joy keeps you moving. I told him I'd never had that. The child. The joy. The reason to keep going beyond my next shift. He looked at me a moment longer. Then asked if I always looked like I were bracing for something. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I told him it came with the job. And with growing up in a house where achievement meant marriage, motherhood, or something with a Hallmark card. He nodded. Said expectations are just someone else's version of your future. And maybe it was time I wrote my own. That line stayed with me. Not because it was poetic, but because it felt true. For the first time in years, someone had looked at me and not asked me to explain myself. He just saw me. As I was, we shared the fruit. Emma ran over once to show us a sticker she'd won in a baby-themed bingo game. Adam ruffled her hair. She grinned at both of us, then ran off again. I watched her go, then looked back at him. The moment lingered warm and fragile, like something beginning. I was standing near the back window when Emma found me again. Most of the guests had moved outside to the patio where Claire was posing for more photos. The afternoon light spilled across the floor, catching the edge of Emma's curls as she walked up and slipped her hand into mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. She looked up, her cheeks flushed from playing. "You look like someone who knows really good bedtime stories," she said. I blinked. My throat tightened, caught off guard by how simply the words landed. She wasn't trying to be sweet. She wasn't trying to fill space. She just meant it. I knelt beside her, asked why she thought that. She shrugged and said it was my eyes. They looked like they remembered dreams. I didn't know what to say. My chest ached in a way I hadn't felt in years. No one had ever looked at me like that. Not as someone lacking. Just someone full of something. She leaned her head against my shoulder for a second before darting away again, chasing after her balloon fox. I stayed kneeling, the warmth of her words still holding me there. A 6-year-old had just given me more kindness than most adults in my life ever had. I glanced across the room. Claire stood by the sliding door, one hand on her belly, the other holding a glass of lemonade. She was watching. Our eyes met. Her smile faltered for the first time all day. Just slightly. But I saw it. A flicker. A question she hadn't meant to ask herself. I stood slowly, brushing my hands against my dress. Something in me had shifted. A knot loosened. A breath released. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that house. I didn't feel like I had to explain why I was enough. And it had nothing to do with proving anything. 2 months passed after the baby shower. The leaves started to change. My apartment windows stayed open longer at night. And somewhere between hospital shifts and slow Sunday mornings, Adam and I fell into a quiet rhythm. We didn't make announcements. We didn't rush. Sometimes we just met at the park while Emma played or shared takeout in the break room when our shifts overlapped. It was easy, uncomplicated, but real. I hadn't told anyone in my family, not because I was hiding it, but because it felt sacred. And for once, I didn't want to hand something good over just to see it weighed and measured. But Claire found out. I don't know how. Maybe someone at the hospital mentioned it. Or maybe she saw us. One morning I opened my messages to a long paragraph that didn't say much, but said everything. She felt betrayed. Said I had always tried to steal her light. That I couldn't just let her have this moment. I didn't reply. Not right away. I wasn't angry. Just tired of the story we kept playing out. One where I was always taking even when I barely had anything in my hands. 3 days later, there was a knock on my door just past 6 o'clock. I opened it to see Claire, hair pulled back. No makeup, eyes rimmed in red. She didn't ask to come in. Just stood there, her voice low, almost cracking. "Can I sit?" she asked. We sat on my couch. She didn't speak for a while, just stared at the mug I'd placed in front of her. It wasn't until she whispered that she was tired that I realized she wasn't talking about that day. She was talking about everything. She said she felt like she was watching her life from the outside, like someone had handed her a script at 22 and she kept reading it out of fear she'd forget her lines. She said everyone told her marriage would fix her. Then the baby. But none of it quieted that hollow space inside. She said she used to envy me. Not because I had more, but because I could say no. To parties, to plans, to expectations. She couldn't. Every time she smiled for a photo or decorated a nursery, she felt like she was trying to outrun something, and it was catching up. I listened. Not because I had to, but because I finally could. She said the things she'd said at the shower weren't really about me. They were about her panic, her shame. The way watching me live outside the lines made her question the ones she followed. I asked her if she was okay. She shook her head, then nodded, then said she didn't know, that maybe the only thing more exhausting than pretending everything was perfect was finally saying it wasn't. I reached for her hand. It wasn't instinct. It was choice. And when she didn't pull away, I held it. We sat like that for a long time. Not as rivals, not as cautionary tales, but as sisters. Messy, confused, breaking the pattern. One conversation at a time. Life with Adam unfolded like pages in a book I hadn't known I was allowed to read. Not dramatic or grand, just steady. His morning started earlier than mine. His hair still damp when he poured coffee into a thermos. Emma, all sleepy smiles and mismatched socks, would tug her backpack on backward and ask if I was picking her up from school later. Most days I did. We found a rhythm. Tuesdays were taco nights. Fridays were movie nights with Emma curled between us, popcorn spilled into couch cushions. On Sundays, we went to the park where Emma made up songs about clouds, and I carried extra tissues in my pocket like a mom without the title. One afternoon, a letter arrived with Claire's handwriting on the front. Inside was a simple note. No excuses. No grand explanations. Just a few lines saying she was sorry, that she was working on herself, that she hoped one day I could forgive her for the moments she chose cruelty when kindness was possible. I held the letter for a long time. My first instinct was to fold it up and tuck it away, but I didn't. I forgave her, not because she had earned it, but because I wanted to stop carrying the weight of what she never gave. Forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about choosing peace over memory. Emma came home from school that week with a handmade card. Blue construction paper, glitter glue, uneven letters. Inside it said, "I was the best storyteller ever." She had drawn a picture of me sitting in a chair with a book, her curled up beside me like a cat. I stared at the card longer than I meant to. It was crooked, messy, and perfect. I kept it on the fridge. Every time I opened it, I smiled. Not because I had won something, but because I had stopped losing myself in what other people needed me to be. Family didn't come with titles. It wasn't just who shared your blood. Sometimes it looked like two tired adults passing notes in a hospital hallway. Sometimes it looked like bedtime stories and burnt pancakes. And sometimes it looked like letting go of old wounds without needing applause for healing. It was 8:15 p.m. when I closed Emma's bedroom door. The nightlight cast a soft glow across the hallway. Her room smelled faintly of lavender shampoo and crayons. She had fallen asleep halfway through our story, her cheek resting on the worn cover of the same book we'd read that first afternoon. I stood there for a moment listening to the soft rhythm of her breath. My chest ached in the gentlest way, full but calm. There had been a time not so long ago when I thought quiet meant lonely. Now it meant peace. I walked back to the living room where the dishes were still in the sink, and Adam's jacket was draped over the back of the chair. It wasn't a picture-perfect life, but it was mine. Built day by day not from what others gave me, but from what I chose to keep. When I was little, I believed in fairy tales. I thought love looked a certain way, that it had to come by a deadline, that if it didn't arrive wrapped in someone else's approval, it wouldn't count. But life has a different rhythm. It doesn't reward the loudest or the fastest. Sometimes it waits, quietly, until you're ready. I didn't get the story my family dreamed for me. I didn't follow the script. But I got something better. A daughter I didn't give birth to, but love like breath. A partner who sees me without trying to fix me. And a voice I finally learned to trust. To anyone sitting alone in a room full of noise wondering why they haven't caught up, I see you. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're just on your own path. And maybe the most important stories aren't the ones that arrive on time. They're the ones we dare to write ourselves.